Mike, are you with us?
I am indeed. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you. We can't see you at the moment. Let me just say a quick word or two about Mike. Mike started out as an IT consultant in Anderson, so he's an example of that route straight into consulting from university. Moved from Anderson to KPMG and IT guy all the way through. I've known him since the 1990s. In fact, the first thing I remember him doing is telling us all about the problems of year 2000. And as well as his day job, he's always been a great enthusiast, would you believe it, for methods, tools, and resources. He loves all that stuff. He used to collect methodologies. And so I thought he would be the ideal person to talk to us a bit about using methods, tools, and resources. Is that a fair summary of your background?
I think it is. I think it is. What I'd like to do, though, is a little mini energizer. Can everybody come off mute? Can you stand up? Now, as you push your chair back, be very careful about any cat's tails behind you. I'd then like you to walk to the door of the room that you're in and open it, and then shout out something positive. Maybe like, I love the BCS, or it's Easter and it's eggs. And then come and sit down and then write your name in the chat for me. So 10 seconds, off you go, something positive, and then put your name in the chat. And beware of any dogs and cats that are lying behind you.
I love the way they're vanishing into their virtual backgrounds.
One of the other things I do is a lot of virtual classroom training, and we're coming up with a lot of different ways of keeping people engaged in the virtual environment, which is more difficult than in the real world, where you can actually see people that are there. And icebreakers don't have to be 10, 15 minutes. They can be very short. And in fact, just standing up and then sitting down again, it raises the heartbeat by about 10 beats a minute. It also slightly changes the blood chemistry, which is great when you're thinking about an approach to doing things. And that's what methods and tools are very much about. And when we're talking about that, there's perhaps a number of maybe terms or words that often come up in this area. As Simon said, I've been working with methodologies and tools, crikey, since the Romans invaded Britain. And for me, it's very much about consistency, also a certain amount about risk. If you think about an airline pilot, they have takeoff checklists and landing checklists. An airline pilot may well have landed at Heathrow when it used to be open hundreds of times. But the one time that you forget, under courage down, you look damn silly as you land. And Simon, you mentioned that you've worked on maybe 100 clients. And of course you think, have I done this bit of the work for this client? Yes or no? I can't remember. In the same way, a pilot's doing continual flying. Or if you think about a doctor, a surgeon, it may be your 100th time of doing heart surgery, but again, have I remembered all the steps in the process? And one of the things that methods can do is help us repeat success. And I think there was something in the chat earlier about wanting an experienced surgeon doing work on you rather than an inexperienced surgeon. And of course, what they are doing is they're building best practice or good practice or whatever term you like to use, and making sure that we can learn lessons, repeat success, and improve quality. And at the same time, lower the risk of things going wrong, because you can't get totally rid of risk, but you can start to adhere and measure and put it to an acceptable level. So a method or a methodology, maybe call it an approach, often it will also have, as well as what I call the words of wisdom, the actual steps of doing things, it may have examples from the past, maybe artifacts, model solutions, could be technique papers, could be past examples, maybe a spreadsheet that someone's used in the past, templates. And all of these is what I refer to as methods and tools. I have been on some meditation videos in the past, And for only £50 an hour, I can be. I shall leave my calling card at the end of this session. In terms of some general and specific types of methods that you come across, on our next foil, I've got some examples here. On some cases, we've got what I might call general purpose. Things like project management or maybe agile around Scrum. But also we may come across some very specific. If you're perhaps working with SAP or Oracle, if you're doing voice over IP design. It'd be great to hear from you in the chat. What do you think makes for a really good method, and have you heard of any in your travels? I want to do what we call a chat pod storm. So I'd like you to type in the chat, but don't hit enter just yet. Wait till I give you a 3, 2, 1 and then go. So I'm going to go quiet for 30 seconds and let you type your answer, but don't hit enter until I give you the shout. Let's get typing. Just a few more seconds. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hit enter now, please. Whoa, and I can see a huge amount of stuff coming through, which is fantastic. What a chatbot storm does is it's a bit more democratic than just typing straight into the chat. As we all know, people's learning styles, some people are very active and always the first with their hands up. Others prefer to reflect. And the storm gives everybody equal opportunity. And then as the facilitator, you can scan through and see what's there and maybe pick up on a few particular items. I can see things like Kotter, the 8 steps of change. Will you be covering Kotter on a later topic, Simon?
Not intentionally.
That might come up. I can see Prince 2, that's coming up very shortly.
Somebody mentioned common sense. I like that one.
Yes. Now, this is a little trade secret. Actually, a lot of consulting is applied common sense. But I can see Paul Stevens smiling there. He's probably been there himself. And you could argue, of course, that what a method is doing is sort of codifying accepted common sense for a particular piece or style of work we're doing. Pestle and SWOT, Johari window, is that Rebecca S? Do you want to come off mute? I'm assuming is that Rebecca S? Reb S?
Actually, Rabina.
Rabina, apologies.
No, it's not a problem.
Tell me more about the Johari window.
I think I like the fact that it can be applied in more than one way, and I like the fact that it gives multiple perspectives on a situation, but also that you can hand it over to somebody else and then guide them more through coaching rather than direction to consider what their problem area is and to view it from those different angles. But I like perspective tools for that reason, and most of them can be used in a really ad hoc way, just to generate ideas, and you don't have to take ownership for that. They can take ownership for themselves.
The Johari window actually comes from a couple of psychologists called Joe and Harry, and they just combine their name to make it Johari. And it's looking at aspects that you see of yourself that's public, things that other people see of you that's private. And it's a great way of analysing the different aspects of your personality. Charlie Houston, remind us what DMAIC stands for, DMAIC.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, design, measure, analyze, improve, and control.
Control, yep, that's also a great one. Excel spreadsheets from Jim S. Antonio. The method we use is like gold dust. Oh, tell me more, Antonio.
So it's our internal project methodology.
Yeah.
And being really, really new into consultancy, just the fact that I've got all these senior guys that have been there, done it so many times. They've just got so many ways of best practice and just so much experience to pour down. Sometimes I am literally like a little kid in a sweet shop.
Sweet shop.
It's just so good to have.
Actually, therein lies sometimes the problem. Are there too many suites, too many methodologies out there? The other worry is you can get rather stuck on a particular one that sort of you love and enjoy. And are we missing out on other aspects, other methods that might bring some fresh perspective? I can see Lego Serious Play, which I've seen a lot. There's some great YouTube videos around that. 9 Boxing. Man Cave. Oh, Chris Patsaloo, tell us about your man cave.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay?
I can, Chris. Welcome.
Yeah, this was out of necessity. I got, about 5 years ago, was told by my wife I'm getting booted out the 3rd bedroom when my youngest was being born. So I had to ask my next door neighbour, who was a builder, to kindly build me my own little cabin at the end of the garden.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's right next to his workshop. I didn't have the hindsight of having this soundproofed, and I can hear him drilling at night sometimes. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a great space to have. It's like sorry to hijack this a bit, but it's good to have some place where once you've finished work, you close the door and then you go home. So that's how I find it. Because when I used to work in my office inside the house, it was difficult to get away. So I suppose you got to also think about your work-life balance. So, but yeah.
That also reminds me of my risk management methodology, which basically is you go on a very long train ride and stare out of the window until you've thought of all the risks.
I think there's an awful lot of truth in that. I can see a lot of alluding to a lot of the agiles, the Kanban boards, Scrum, etc. in here. If we move on to our next slide and think about perhaps who owns the methods and what can you actually use? Because typically you will find some methods you might call sort of public domain. As it says here, maybe some generic project management principles. Prince2 was mentioned several times on the chat. This is where you can sort of buy the manual, pay your sort of 50, 60 pounds and approve training, get certified, and then you can use it. And if you've not seen it, MSP, Managing Successful Programs, is Prince2's evil twin sister. Prince is very much around projects, MSP around programs. There's actually a third sister, which is P3O, which is the Project and Programmer Portfolio Office, which goes alongside Prince and MSP. Then you may find that there's specific organizations, and not surprisingly, a lot of the big players, the big four, have their own approaches, methods, sometimes even trademarked, which you could only use with their participation, often because you're employed by the organization. And of course, clients themselves may have their own versions of methods they developed over many years as well. Our next slide is around what could I use from previous clients. And they've got to tread carefully here around who's owning the intellectual property. Because the second bullet says, most of it you probably find you've contracted either to your employer or to your client. And I think, Simon, you've got a lot of experience working on both sides of the fence, both as an employee and as a contractor. Have you found in most cases somebody already owns it or your contract deems them to own it?
Well, I think it says on the slide, somebody always owns it. Question is really whether or not you can use it. When it comes to general principles, then I would hope that no one claims the right to have decided that project management should involve thinking about what the tasks are and when they start. So you can't really say that that sort of level of principle is intellectual property. But when if you look at project management methodologies, to continue that example, you tend to think that whoever wrote the methodology said the same thing as everybody else, but just needed to find different words for it so that they weren't plagiarizing.
And as the bullet says, number 4, I would always check, especially contractually in writing, what can be reused and what belongs to the client and what you could reuse in the future. I think if in doubt, check, consult, ask questions, don't make assumptions. And as the last bullet says, be very careful about giving any of the clients know-how away, because in some cases that might be a competitive edge for them. The next slide is talking a bit about knowledge management. And in fact, this slide, probably the picture needs on the right-hand side a little lever with knowledge up, knowledge down, or sort of knowledge upload and knowledge download. One of the things that methodologies are very good at is capturing knowledge, capturing ways of doing things. And anybody who's done Agile, could you just write the word Agile into the chat for me, please? If you ever worked on Agile, be it Scrum, Extreme, XP, just write Agile. I can see a lot of people have. Because for me, one of the nice things about Agile is those retrospectives that you do in every sprint, if you're using the Scrum approach, where you're learning all the time and going back and seeing how could I increase velocity, how could I improve what we've done, how can I improve the knowledge that we've got. And certainly I've seen in my sort of 35 years the importance of capturing knowledge and then sharing it, and maybe making sure that you perhaps rewrite it in clearer English, easier to use nomenclature, so everybody can take the benefit from that. And I think, Simon, it's probably fair to say that one of the roles of the BCS is to do a lot of that on behalf of the IT industry.
Yes, I think so. The thing about the BCS is it is a nebulous organisation. I mean, there are people specialising in almost anything you could imagine. And I keep tripping over specialities I've never even encountered before. So yeah, a huge amount of work internally and externally, working with IT practitioners around the world, working with education, research establishments, etc. So a lot of that work. What it doesn't have, as far as I know, is a kind of knowledge base that you can just tap into, rather like this machine. I think if we had that machine, it would make everybody's life much happier.
It would indeed. Our next slide is which methods and tools do you actually use? And there's always this sort of ongoing debate of, are we going to use the clients? Are we going to use yours? Whether that's as a sole contractor or we're working with, say, one of the big consultancy houses. And you might actually say, is it a bit of a trick question? Because you might consider during perhaps the tender process, them asking the question, well, which method do you propose we use? And where do you score the most points from? Is it you say we've got some fantastic method of our own that's sort of world beating, or do we go down an industry standard? And in, say, project management, we've got Prince2. There's also the Project Management Institute, which has its body of knowledge, which I think, Simon, you over the years have been involved in helping to update.
Yes, I worked on their program management method many years ago. And I think they've deleted my contributions.
I can say I was involved in one of the early versions of the P30 work. And a lot of those tomes, if you look, are on sort of version 5, 6, 7. But over 20, 30 years, they've been continually looked at, updated with new information, with new ways of doing things. So you do need to ask that question of which approach, which method are we going to be using? And the final bit of this little interlude is around accreditations. Because there's a big sort of industry in training people and giving out accreditations. In the chat, if anybody's got Prince2 or they've got Scrum Master, could they write Prince2 or the word Scrum Master into the chat now, please? I can see quite a few Prince 2s coming up, and Scrum Master. Lisa Vickers is top of our pile this evening, having both. And one of the difficult things is everybody wants to, in industry, give you an accreditation because you've got to pay to pass an exam and maybe pay for your accreditation. And then guess what? It's on maybe a 2 or 3 year time limited before you need to renew it and have a refresher course that you pay for and maybe pay for a new accreditation. It's been an interesting debate over my sort of 30 years as to whether some of the certifications actually sort of worth the paper they're written on. We haven't got time to go into that now, but I would caution not just running in and getting endless accreditations. Make sure it actually helps you with your particular either personal business, if you're a sole contractor, or if you're with one of the big consultancies, whether actually it's of use to you there as well. So we're just on past, which I think is the end of this session. Any particular questions, observations, insults, any job offers? If you've got a question, could you type it in the chat pod now? If you haven't got a question, could you give me a little smiley face instead? So either write a question or give me a smiley face. So that's another trick you could steal. Instead of asking a question and they get that difficult silence, give people the option to either write the question or to give you a heads up that they've had enough. Is what I'm finding annoying, David? I'm not sure that's a question. What's your favorite go-to tool or method? At the moment, it's probably Scrum, because I've been doing an awful lot with Agile, but also I'm noticing that a lot of sort of the Agile terms are creeping into general daily business life, be it stand-ups, be it retrospectives. And Agile, to my mind, is much more of a mindset than a tick box exercise. And you may not have to use every single element in Agile. Pick and choose which bits help you get the job done. Have you had to just nod and smile when individuals try to explain your skill to you? I've got a tip sheet of 150 ways to engage. And guess what the very first one is? It's smile. It's smile. So as I leave, could I ask everybody to come off, put your videos on and give me the biggest smile you possibly can? On 3, 1, 2, 3, yay! That's great. Simon, back over to you.
Thanks, Mike. That was a great session. Superb. We should move on to, and thank you for catching up on time a little bit. We squeezed your performance, I think.